Welcome to Success Lore, where the untold stories of wealth and success come alive. Get ready to dive into the lives of the world's most inspiring people and uncover the secrets behind their legendary journeys. Donald John Trump's story began in Queens, New York, where he was born on June 14, 1946, the fourth of five children in the family of Fred Trump, a highly successful real estate developer, and Mary Ann McLeod Trump. Growing up in a household that valued ambition and achievement, Donald quickly learned that success was not optional, it was expected. As a boy, Donald was energetic, competitive, and often got into trouble. At 13, after a series of disciplinary problems, his parents enrolled him in the New York Military Academy. What was intended as a corrective measure turned into a defining experience. Donald thrived in the structured, high-pressure environment, rising to become a student leader and captain of the baseball team. He discovered a taste for leadership, discipline, and winning, traits that would shape the rest of his life. After graduating, Donald spent 2 years at Fordham University before transferring to the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, one of the few schools in the country with a specialized real estate program. At Wharton, he developed a clear vision to not just follow in his father's footsteps, but to become one of the most prominent developers in Manhattan. By the time Donald graduated in 1968, New York City was teetering on the edge of financial decline, and opportunities were everywhere for those daring enough to take them. Fred Trump offered his son a place in the family business, but Donald wanted to carve out his own path in Manhattan, where the stakes were higher, the risks greater, and the rewards far more dazzling. Just as he was planning his next move, Donald told him about a decaying property in Manhattan that everyone else had passed on, a once grand hotel that had become a financial disaster. Donald saw what others couldn't, a chance to make his mark on New York City. But stepping into Manhattan's high-stakes real estate world would mean taking on entrenched rivals, skeptical bankers, and a city bureaucracy that devoured young developers. Donald decided to go all in. Donald threw himself into the challenge of revitalizing the crumbling Commodore Hotel, a property many considered a lost cause. Located near Grand Central Terminal, it was once a jewel of Manhattan, but had fallen into such disrepair that investors dismissed it as a money pit. Donald, barely in his late 20s, saw not ruin, but potential. Securing financing was the first obstacle. Bankers laughed at the idea of a young, unproven developer taking on such an ambitious project. Donald spent months pitching his vision, finally persuading the Hyatt Corporation to partner with him. Even then, the deal hinged on obtaining a crucial tax abatement from New York City, a Herculean task in the city's notoriously tangled bureaucracy. Donald's persistence paid off. He spent months negotiating, leveraging his father's connections and his own growing reputation as a relentless deal-maker. Eventually, he convinced city officials to grant a 40-year tax break, a decision that would later be hailed as a turning point in Manhattan's redevelopment. Construction was intense. Donald was on site constantly, overseeing every detail and ensuring that the project met his exacting standards. When the Grand Hyatt opened in 1980, it was a triumph. The once derelict hotel was now a gleaming symbol of New York's revival, and Donald Trump was suddenly a rising star in the city's competitive real estate scene. Buoyed by this success, Donald turned his attention to a more ambitious dream, building a skyscraper that would become a landmark of modern luxury. He envisioned a tower that would bear his name in bold letters, instantly recognizable and synonymous with prestige. But as plans for Trump Tower began to take shape, Donald faced fierce opposition from rivals who were determined to stop him. Financing was uncertain, the site was mired in logistical complications, and the pressure mounted daily. Still, Donald pressed forward, convinced that Trump Tower would define his career. On the eve of breaking ground, one of his lenders warned him that pulling off a project of this magnitude could either make him the king of Manhattan or bury him under a mountain of debt. Donald didn't hesitate. He was all in. Trump Tower was to be Donald's defining statement, a 58-story glass skyscraper on Fifth Avenue that would symbolize ambition, wealth, and the new face of Manhattan. Acquiring the site had been a feat in itself, involving years of negotiations, buyouts of reluctant tenants, and securing the rights to the land. Financing was another challenge. Lenders were wary of the enormous risk, but Donald's relentless persuasion and growing reputation finally brought the money together. Construction began in 1979, and Donald was deeply involved in every detail, from the signature bronze-tinted glass to the cascading indoor waterfalls and the luxury condominiums that would redefine upscale living. His obsession with perfection sometimes led to clashes with contractors and architects, but he refused to compromise on his vision. By the time Trump Tower opened in 1983, it was a sensation. Celebrities, business magnates, and wealthy buyers flocked to own a piece of the tower, and its grand atrium became one of Manhattan's must-see destinations. The success solidified Donald's image as a bold and unstoppable force in real estate. As his fame grew, so did his personal life. He had married Ivana Zelnichkova, a former Czech model with a keen business sense who became deeply involved in the Trump Organization. Together, they became New York's ultimate power couple, appearing regularly in society pages and at high-profile events. Riding the wave of Trump Tower's success, Donald expanded aggressively. He acquired the Plaza Hotel, developed massive casino properties in Atlantic City, and even launched ventures in sports and airlines. The Trump name was becoming not just a brand, but a cultural phenomenon, a shorthand for success and luxury. Yet the rapid expansion came at a cost. Donald's projects were heavily leveraged, and cracks in the financial foundation began to show. Some industry observers warned that he was moving too fast, taking on too much debt, and leaving himself vulnerable to shifts in the market. Donald brushed off the concerns, convinced that the next big deal was always around the corner. But in the volatile world of the 1980s economy, storm clouds were gathering, clouds that would soon threaten everything he had built. By the late 1980s, Donald Trump was everywhere, on magazine covers, television talk shows, and the front pages of newspapers. He embodied the excess and bravado of the decade, with his gold-plated lifestyle, high-profile ventures, and a growing empire that stretched from Manhattan to Atlantic City. But the empire was built on aggressive borrowing. Donald had taken on billions in debt to finance his expansion into casinos, hotels, and other ambitious projects. In 1987, the stock market crash sent shockwaves through the economy, and cracks began to show in Trump's carefully constructed financial machine. Revenues fell, interest payments mounted, and creditors started asking uncomfortable questions. The problems deepened in the early 1990s when a nationwide recession hit hard. Trump's Atlantic City casinos, once a crown jewel of his empire, began hemorrhaging money. His airline venture collapsed, and even his prized Plaza Hotel became a financial burden. Headlines that had once celebrated his audacity now speculated openly about his downfall, with some calling his empire a house of cards. Donald faced the fight of his life. His debts had ballooned to billions, and banks were threatening to seize control of his properties. For a man whose public persona was built on the image of unshakable success, the possibility of losing everything was a crushing blow. He refused to quit. Trump personally negotiated with dozens of banks, restructuring his debts and convincing creditors that keeping him in control was their best chance of getting paid back. He sold off assets, slashed costs, and slowly stabilized the Trump Organization. In the process, Donald's personal life unraveled. His marriage to Ivana collapsed amid tabloid-fueled scandals, and a bitter, highly publicized divorce followed. For the first time, Donald's personal and professional struggles were playing out on the front pages of every newspaper in America. Yet, even in his lowest moments, Trump saw an opportunity for reinvention. He began to focus on his most valuable asset, the Trump name, turning it into a global brand that could outshine even the darkest days of his financial woes. By the mid-1990s, Donald Trump had clawed his way back from the brink of financial collapse. He streamlined his business operations, focused on licensing the Trump brand, and rebuilt his reputation as a master dealmaker. Instead of owning every building, he began lending his name to properties around the world, turning Trump into a symbol of luxury that generated revenue without the heavy burden of debt. His public image shifted as well. No longer just a real estate developer, Donald became a celebrity businessman. He cultivated relationships with the media, appeared on talk shows, and maintained a relentless presence in the public eye. His new marriage to model Melania Knauss added a touch of glamour, and their son Barron became a source of quiet pride for Donald amid the chaos of his work. The turning point came in 2004 with the launch of The Apprentice, a reality TV show where contestants competed for a job within the Trump organization. Donald's commanding presence and his now iconic catchphrase, "You're fired," made the show a cultural phenomenon. It ran for over a decade, elevating Trump from a New York business figure to a household name recognized across America and beyond. As his celebrity grew, so did his influence. The Trump brand expanded into golf courses, hotels, and residential properties worldwide. Donald became a fixture in popular culture, admired by some for his boldness and criticized by others for his brash persona, but impossible to ignore. Behind the scenes, he kept a close watch on politics, frequently commenting on economic policy, trade, and America's role in the world. His outspoken views and ability to connect with a broad audience led some to speculate about a future in politics, though few took the idea seriously at the time. Then, in 2015, Donald made an announcement that would shock the political establishment and change his life forever. He was running for president of the United States. When Donald Trump descended the golden escalator in Trump Tower in June 2015 to announce his candidacy for president, the moment instantly became iconic. Many in the political establishment dismissed it as a publicity stunt, a sideshow that would fade quickly. But Trump's message, centered on economic revival, border security, and challenging the political elite, resonated with millions of Americans who felt left behind. His campaign rallies drew massive crowds, filled with energy and a sense of rebellion against the status quo. Trump's brash style and unfiltered rhetoric dominated the media cycle, giving him constant coverage without the traditional spending required by other candidates. Political pundits and rivals underestimated him at every turn, believing his unconventional approach would eventually implode. Instead, he surged ahead, defeating a crowded Republican field to secure the party's nomination. By then, his slogan, "Make America Great Again," had become a rallying cry for supporters who saw Trump as an outsider willing to take on entrenched political powers. The general election against Hillary Clinton was one of the most contentious and closely watched in American history. Virtually every major poll and media outlet predicted Trump's defeat, but on election night in November 2016, the results stunned the world. Donald J. Trump had won, becoming the 45th president of the United States. For Trump, it was the ultimate victory, a validation of decades of ambition, resilience, and an unshakable belief in his ability to defy the odds. But he quickly discovered that winning the presidency was only the beginning. The same boldness that propelled him to victory would also bring unprecedented levels of scrutiny, opposition, and controversy. Trump entered the White House determined to govern as a disruptor. He was about to find out just how fierce the battle would be. Donald Trump entered the White House in January 2017, facing both immense expectations and historic opposition. His supporters saw him as an outsider, ready to upend the political establishment. His critics vowed to resist him at every turn. Almost immediately, his administration launched sweeping changes, tax reforms, deregulation efforts, a strong focus on reshaping trade deals, and an emphasis on securing U.S. borders. His presidency was marked by constant media attention and political battles. Trump thrived on direct communication, using Twitter to speak unfiltered to millions of Americans and bypass traditional media channels. His approach electrified his supporters and infuriated his opponents, further deepening the political divide.
Internationally, Trump sought to redefine U.S. relationships. He engaged in high-stakes negotiations with North Korea, took a hard line on China, and pushed NATO allies to increase defense spending. His America First policy reshaped U.S. foreign relations, drawing both praise and criticism worldwide. Domestically, the economy saw significant growth before the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, plunging the country into a health and economic crisis. Trump's handling of the pandemic became a focal point of the 2020 election, energizing his critics and testing the loyalty of his base. The 2020 election against Biden was one of the most contentious in U.S. history, with record voter turnout and widespread debate over mail-in ballots and election integrity. When Biden was declared the winner, Trump challenged the results, leading to months of legal battles and nationwide controversy. On January 20, 2021, Donald Trump left the White House, but he made it clear his political career was far from over. To his supporters, he remained the leader of a movement that had transformed American politics. And as he settled back into private life at Mar-a-Lago, the question loomed: was this the end of the Trump era, or just an intermission?
After leaving Washington in January 2021, Donald Trump quickly reestablished himself as the dominant force within the Republican Party. From his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, he became the rallying point for millions of supporters who believed his political movement was far from over. Candidates seeking his endorsement in the 2022 midterms flocked to his side, knowing his backing could make or break their campaigns. At the same time, Trump faced an onslaught of legal challenges and investigations into his business dealings and the events surrounding the 2020 election. Critics hoped to sideline him permanently, but each attempt only seemed to energize his base. Rallies across the country drew tens of thousands, and Trump's influence over Republican politics remained unmatched. He sharpened his message, focusing on economic revival, energy independence, and what he called restoring America's greatness. Rumors of another presidential run swirled constantly, and in November 2022, Trump made it official. He was running for president again in 2024. The campaign reignited fierce debates across the nation. Supporters viewed him as the only one who could challenge the political establishment and undo the policies of his successor. Opponents portrayed him as a polarizing figure whose return would deepen national divisions. As the primaries approached, it became clear that Trump remained the frontrunner. His rallies drew unprecedented enthusiasm, and his grip on the party appeared unshakable. Yet, the stakes were higher than ever. He was no longer just a former president seeking redemption. He was a movement leader preparing for one of the most consequential comebacks in American history. The path to 2024, however, would soon take a dramatic and violent turn that no one could have predicted. On July 13, 2024, during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump stepped onto the stage before a massive crowd of supporters. It was supposed to be another high-energy event, the kind he had mastered over the years. But within minutes of beginning his speech, chaos erupted. A gunman opened fire from a rooftop overlooking the event. A bullet struck Trump in the upper right ear, grazing his head and sending blood down his face. Secret Service agents immediately tackled him to the ground and formed a protective shield around his body as the crowd scattered in panic. One rally attendee standing behind the former president was killed and two others were injured. The shooter was quickly neutralized, but the shock of the incident swept across the world in seconds. Grainy footage of Trump being helped off stage, holding his fist defiantly in the air with blood streaming down his face, went viral and became one of the most dramatic political images in American history. Trump was rushed to a nearby hospital, treated and released within hours. By the next morning, he released a video declaring, "I'm fine. I'm not stopping. We will not back down. We will finish what we started." The assassination attempt drastically altered the tone of the campaign. Americans across the political spectrum were stunned. Trump's supporters doubled down in loyalty, viewing him not only as a political figure, but as a man who was willing to take a bullet for the country. His poll numbers surged,
fundraising exploded, and even some former critics paused to reconsider their stance. In the following weeks, security was heightened at all campaign events, but Trump remained defiant. He continued to campaign, refusing to be silenced or hidden away. The attempt on his life had not weakened him. It had fueled his momentum. As November approached, one thing became clear. The 2024 election would not be just another contest. It would be a historic reckoning. The 2024 presidential election became one of the most closely watched and emotionally charged in American history. The assassination attempt had fundamentally changed the race. Trump supporters saw him as a fighter who had literally risked his life, while his opponents struggled to counter the wave of sympathy and renewed energy around his campaign. Election Day brought record turnout. Millions of Americans stood in line for hours, determined to have their voices heard. As results trickled in late into the night, a pattern emerged. Trump was outperforming expectations in key battleground states. By early morning, major news networks made it official. Donald J. Trump had won the election and would return to the White House as the 47th President of the United States. For Trump, it was the ultimate comeback, a victory that cemented his place in American political history as the first president in decades to win non-consecutive terms. His second inauguration in January 2025 was a spectacle of security given the events of the previous summer. Standing on the Capitol steps, Trump delivered a speech focused on unity, economic revival, and what he called finishing the work we began. In the early months of his second term, Trump pushed aggressively to implement his agenda, tightening immigration policies, pursuing large-scale energy projects, and renegotiating international trade deals. His administration continued to face fierce opposition from political adversaries and ongoing legal battles, but Trump was undeterred, framing every challenge as proof that he was fighting for the people who elected him. Despite the controversies and constant media battles, Trump's second term marked the peak of his decades-long journey, from a young real estate developer in Queens to one of the most consequential and polarizing figures in modern American history. And through it all, one thing remained clear. Donald J. Trump's influence on America would endure long after his final day in office. Donald Trump's return to the White House in 2025 marked the culmination of a lifetime defined by ambition, resilience, and controversy. His second term began under intense scrutiny, with supporters expecting sweeping changes and critics preparing for fierce opposition. Trump prioritized economic growth, energy independence, and stricter border security. Early in his second term, he pushed through major tax and regulatory reforms aimed at stimulating investment and job creation. Internationally, he renegotiated trade agreements and pressed allies to contribute more to defense, doubling down on his America First agenda. The attempted assassination in 2024 had left a lasting mark on his presidency. Security around him was unprecedented, and the image of Trump raising his fist with blood streaming down his face remained a rallying symbol for his supporters. To many, he embodied determination and the refusal to be silenced, no matter the cost. Despite constant political battles and ongoing legal disputes, Trump's influence remained unmatched. His rallies continued to draw tens of thousands, and his ability to dominate the national conversation never waned. International leaders, whether allies or adversaries, recognized that Trump's America commanded attention on the world stage. As his second term progressed, Trump often reflected on his extraordinary journey. From a young boy in Queens watching his father build an empire, to a real estate mogul, a global brand, a TV star, and finally, a two-time President of the United States. For his supporters, Donald J. Trump had become more than a political figure. He was a symbol of defiance, perseverance, and an unyielding belief in his vision of America. Even as debates raged about his legacy, one fact was undeniable. Trump had reshaped the political landscape in a way no one else could, leaving an imprint that would last for generations.